So, Ms. Aguirre, to you, is the American dream success or happiness?
I think my definition of the quintessential American dream, just from like study of literature and social observations and having been quite steeped in American culture for a while, is that success is happiness. That I think, particularly in this country, there's this idea of if you're generating income, if you have an ability to buy yourself things and provide for your children, that the more, what I consider to be a wholesome definition of happiness, which in my mind is like sharing really good food with people that you love and going to beautiful places and having time to read and having time to do whatever the hell that you want. I don't think that concept of happiness plays a role in American society. I think often that's seen as like lazy and sort of superfluous.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that Americans take a lot of pride in being able to provide. And I think that's a really nice thing when you have a family. And I think it becomes a pretty problematic thing when you're like, well, what new car do I want? Like, what fancier apartment do I want to move into? Because, I mean, there's just no end to that. You never get to a point where you're like, this is the best car in the world. I'm done.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know, I think for my definition of, this idea of like more like quote unquote wholesome happiness, I do think you can get to a place where after, a 3-hour meal and after like sharing stories and feeling like you're reconnecting with people that you miss in your day-to-day and that you miss when you're at work, there's very much a feeling of like, this is the best. And so I think there's just a peace and a satisfaction that comes from that is impossible with material things. It's tricky for me to split sort of my educator role with my like individual role, but
especially living at Choate.
Yes, for sure. But I think on both fronts, I think I feel compelled, even if I'm like amongst my college friends or if I'm like teaching sophomores, to just make people aware of like the roots of the American dream and to understand like what it is to like come to a country that is like someone's home, come to these like really impressive, incredible civilizations and just decide that it's barbaric. And so like what does it mean for like our society that like at the very root of like Americanness, it's conquering. Mm-hmm. And I think now that we're like, well, we have this entire country, there's no more land to conquer, we're good. Now that it's not sort of physical space, it's this idea of like intellectual space, it's this idea of like economic growth, because I really believe that this entire country is like founded on this, like, let's prove to everyone else how much better we are. And when you don't have the sort of cut and dry signs of growth and improvement that we had in the 17th, 18th century, all of a sudden now it's like, all right, well, let me prove to everyone around me how much better I am. So in a weird way, it's like become very individualistic. I think we've lost like a lot of this concept of like, let's do something for like our countrymen and for the people that we decide are our community. But on the other hand, I feel like that concept historically is really problematic. I think we run into like fewer nationwide issues, mostly because people are really concerned with their own stuff. And so there's not this idea of like, all right, like let's get a group together, let's do this. And really, I think the only place that I still see that in a way that I believe is productive is in like activist, like social activist culture. I think particularly in the last 10 years, because of the just like egregious atrocities that the U.S. has like committed to its own people, there's definitely this like heightened awareness that I honestly don't think is like just youth culture up. I think it's people that are plugged in, people that take the time to educate themselves are like, no, this is unacceptable. And so that to me is fascinating. And I think that would probably be like my definition of the American dream, is this idea of like, you need to educate yourself, you need to figure out like psychologically and emotionally what's going to bring you like peace, stability, no matter what, even if that means that you like set up a tent and you hang out and you fish and you do your thing. Like, society's going to hate that, but if you're happy, then that's a perfect dream, you know? But I think for younger people that are searching for that, there's a lot of solace and there's a lot of power that can be found in activism and going out and meeting people. And you know, if you grow up in a really nice town in Connecticut and those are the people that you spent all your life around, it really is your duty to be like, okay, we're going into New Haven, we're going into the crappy part of New Haven, here we go. And I just think what prevents people from doing that is straight up fear, and then also this idea that like others and people that we consider others because of like visual markers and because of like intellectual differences, there's like a total write-off within Americans that those quote unquote others have nothing to teach us. And so if we can be like more open to like what we can learn outside of like structured class space and what we can learn through conversations, I think that can unleash some really like potent ass-kicking awareness of inequalities, and then you can take that and find your community and find power in that.